Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories, here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. The Olympic Peninsula Incident. Ezra Blackwood's account 3 in the morning. It's always 3 in the morning when I wake up hearing those sounds again. My new house is over 1,000 miles from Olympic National Park, but still, I still hear them. The sound of boots on wet moss, the creak of old-growth cedar bending in wind that shouldn't exist. My wife says they're just nightmares. She wasn't there. She didn't see what I saw that October night in the Washington rainforest. My name is Ezra Blackwood, and I need to tell someone this story. It's been 4 years since I left my job as a forest ranger and moved to Arizona, about as far from that green hell as I could get without leaving the country. Here in Phoenix, everything is dry, open, visible. No shadows that move when they shouldn't. No sounds that echo from places sound can't come from. But still, at 3 in the morning, I'm back there. I was 29 when it happened, had been working Olympic National Park for 3 years. Not long enough to be a veteran, too long to be green. That's a dangerous place to be in that job. You think you know what you're doing, but you don't know what you don't know yet. Washington's Olympic Peninsula is unlike anywhere else in America. Those ancient rainforests, some trees over 1,000 years old, create a world unto themselves. Moss hangs everywhere like funeral shrouds, the canopy so thick that noon feels like twilight. Sound behaves differently there, gets swallowed, redirected, twisted into things that make your skin crawl. I loved it then. Thought it was the most beautiful place on earth. The Iris Delacroix case started like any other missing person report. October 15th, 2019. A Tuesday that began with the kind of drizzle that soaks through everything. Typical Pacific Northwest autumn weather. Iris was a marine biologist from Portland State, 28 years old, up in the park studying seasonal stream patterns for her dissertation. Smart woman, experienced outdoors. Not the type to make rookie mistakes. She'd checked in with the ranger station every day for a week, following proper protocols, until she didn't. Her last radio check was Sunday evening from the Kino River area, deep in the temperate rainforest section. When she missed her Monday morning call, we started the clock. 24 hours for a missing researcher with proper equipment and experience. Standard procedure. I volunteered to take the initial search. Should have been routine. Follow her documented research sites, check for equipment failure, injury, maybe weather delays. The October rains had been heavier than usual, streams running high and fast, easy enough for someone to get trapped on the wrong side of rising water. I remember loading my gear that Tuesday morning. Full pack with emergency supplies, GPS unit, handheld radio, backup batteries, emergency beacon, first aid kit, everything by the book. My supervisor, Janet Reeves, walked me through the protocol one more time. Follow Iris's research route, check each GPS coordinate she'd logged, radio in every 2 hours. Probably just equipment failure, Janet said, but I caught something in her voice. Concern she wasn't sharing. Her vehicle's still at the Kino trailhead, hasn't been touched. The drive to the trailhead took 45 minutes on winding forest roads. October in the Olympics meant the tourist season was over. Trails mostly empty except for serious hikers and researchers like Iris. I preferred it that way. Fewer people to worry about, fewer variables. The forest felt more honest when it was just you and the wilderness. Iris's Honda CR-V sat alone in the gravel parking area, beaded with moisture from the constant drizzle. I did a quick external check. No signs of disturbance, doors locked, no broken glass. Her gear should have been enough for a week-long study. Tent, sleeping bag, portable weather station, water purification tablets, emergency rations. The kind of equipment that meant she was prepared for problems. The Kino River Trail starts deceptively easy. Wide, well-maintained, clearly marked, perfect for researchers who needed to transport sensitive equipment. But within a mile, it branches into a network of narrow paths that wind deeper into old-growth forest. Some official, some not. Some that appear on maps, others that exist only in the memories of people who've walked them for decades. I started my radio check at Oro 900 hours. Base, this is Ranger Blackwood beginning search pattern Quinol Alpha. Weather conditions overcast. Light precipitation, visibility good. Copy Blackwood. Report status every 2 hours. Be advised, weather service shows heavy rain moving in by 1400 hours. That should have been my first warning. Not the weather. We were used to rain. But the radio crackled with more static than usual. Electronic interference that shouldn't exist in that location. I followed Iris's documented GPS coordinates, marked clearly on my trail map. Her research focused on seasonal flow changes in tributary streams, measuring water temperature and sediment levels. Each research site should have shown signs of recent activity: disturbed ground where she'd set up her portable weather station, boot prints in soft soil near water sources. The first site looked wrong. I found her equipment, the portable weather station, exactly where her GPS logs indicated. But it had been moved, not by weather or animals, deliberately repositioned. The metal stakes that should have secured it were pulled up and replanted, but at angles that made no sense for catching accurate readings. Almost like someone had moved it just to prove they could. My skin prickled with the first touch of real unease. Researchers don't randomly relocate expensive equipment, especially not in ways that compromise their data collection. I keyed my radio. Base, this is Blackwood, located first research site. Evidence of equipment disturbance, possibly weather-related. Static answered me. Then Janet's voice, distant and fragmented. Copy. Blackwood. Repeat. Equipment. Base, signal is breaking up. Equipment appears to have been moved from original position. More static. Then nothing. Electronics fail in the Olympics. Moisture, tree cover, magnetic anomalies from mineral deposits. But my radio had worked perfectly from the same location during training exercises. I checked the battery, adjusted the antenna, switched channels. Nothing but white noise punctuated by occasional fragments of voices I couldn't identify. Following Iris's trail deeper into the forest, I found her second research site 2 hours later. Same story. Equipment present but relocated. Her portable camp table was set up beside a stream, but positioned where morning shade would make temperature readings inaccurate. Her water sampling bottles were arranged in a neat line on a fallen log, but filled with creek water too murky for proper analysis. Someone had been here after Iris. Someone who understood her research enough to move equipment, but not enough to do it correctly. The forest felt different now, quieter. Olympic rainforests are never silent, streams running, wind in the canopy, small animals in the underbrush. But the normal sound seemed muffled, distant, like the forest was holding its breath. I found the first boot print at 1300 hours, not Iris's, wrong size, wrong tread pattern. Size 11 or 12 work boot, military style with aggressive lugs. Fresh, pressed into soft earth beside the stream where she'd been collecting water samples. The print was clean, distinct, recent, made after the morning rain had stopped. Someone else was in the forest, someone following Iris's research route. I should have called for backup then, should have followed protocol and radioed for additional rangers. But my radio was still delivering nothing but static, and pride made me hesitate. 3 years on the job, first major search assignment, and I didn't want to abort because of equipment problems and a single boot print. Stupid. Criminal stupidity that nearly got us both killed. The heavy rain arrived exactly when predicted, transforming the forest floor into a maze of mud and standing water. Streams that had been ankle-deep in the morning were now waist-high torrents. The canopy provided some protection, but water found its way through everything, down my neck, into my boots, soaking through gear I'd thought was waterproof. I was following what appeared to be Iris's trail toward her third documented research site when I heard the voice. Help me. Faint, distant, barely audible over the rain. Female voice, coming from somewhere ahead and to my left. I stopped, listening. Sound travels strangely in wet forest. Echoes off tree trunks, gets absorbed by moss, redirected by terrain. Help me, please. Definitely female. Definitely human. I keyed my radio, hoping the storm might have cleared the interference. Base, this is Blackwood. Possible contact with missing person. Request immediate backup to Kinol Sector 7. Static. I tried my cell phone, knowing it was futile. No signal, not even emergency bands. The Olympic Peninsula has dead zones where you can't reach civilization with anything short of a satellite phone. The voice came again, closer now. Is someone there? Please help me. I followed the sound, pushing through undergrowth that grabbed at my gear and scratched exposed skin. The voice led me off the main trail onto what looked like an old game path, narrow and winding, barely visible under fallen leaves. Keep talking, I called out. I'm a park ranger. Where are you? I'm hurt. I can't walk far. Iris. Had to be Iris. The voice matched the description in her file. Educated, slight East Coast accent from her undergraduate years at Brown. Relief flooded through me. Missing person located, probably injured, but alive and conscious. This was going to be a success story. I found her 20 minutes later, huddled in a makeshift shelter between two massive cedar trees. Someone had constructed a lean-to using fallen branches and emergency tarp, crude but effective protection from the rain. Iris sat inside, wrapped in a space blanket, and the sight of her stopped me cold. She'd been in the forest for 3 days, but she looked like she'd been there for weeks. Her clothes were torn, stained with mud and what looked like blood. Her face was gaunt, eyes hollow with exhaustion and something else. Terror. Deep, bone-level fear that made her hands shake even under the thermal blanket. Iris Delacroix. I'm Ranger Blackwood. Your university contacted us when you missed your check-in. She stared at me like she couldn't process what I was saying. Then tears started, silent and steady. He's been watching me, she whispered. For days. He knows I'm here. He knows you're here now, too. Who's been watching you? Another hiker? She shook her head violently. Not a hiker. He lives here, in the forest. He's been playing with me, moving my equipment, leaving things for me to find. The boot print, the relocated research gear. My stomach clenched with understanding. What kind of things? Iris reached into her backpack with trembling hands and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. She unfolded it carefully, like it might explode. A human tooth. Adult molar, root intact, recently extracted. He left this at my second campsite. There have been others, photos of people I don't recognize, pieces of clothing, and sounds at night, voices calling for help that aren't real. I stared at the tooth, my mind racing through implications. This wasn't random harassment by some unstable individual. This was systematic psychological torture by someone who understood exactly what would terrify an isolated researcher. We need to get you out of here. Can you walk? I think so, but he'll know. He always knows where I am. How does he always know? Good question. The Olympic Peninsula covers nearly 1 million acres. Tracking someone through that terrain in constant rain requires either incredible luck or professional skill. I helped Iris to her feet, noting she favored her left ankle. Twisted, not broken, but enough to slow us down. We gathered her essential gear and abandoned the rest. Speed was more important than equipment now. Stay close to me. We're going back to the main trail, then straight out to the parking area. 2 miles, maybe 3 with the detours around high water. We'd made it maybe half a mile when Iris grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging through my jacket. Do you hear that? I stopped, listening. Rain on leaves, water running over rocks, wind in the canopy. I don't hear anything unusual. Exactly. No birds, no squirrels. Even the insects have stopped. That means he's close. She was right. The forest had gone silent except for weather sounds. In healthy wilderness, that usually means a large predator nearby. Bear, cougar, something that makes smaller animals take cover. Or a human predator who'd learned to move through the forest without disturbing its natural rhythms. Keep moving, I whispered. We'd gone another 100 yards when I found the first gift. My radio, the one that had been malfunctioning all day, sat on a moss-covered stump directly in our path. Except it wasn't my radio. Same model, same olive drab color, but this one had scratches I didn't recognize and what looked like dried blood on the antenna. Iris made a sound like a wounded animal. That's how he does it. He has radios, GPS units, all the equipment rangers carry. He knows your frequencies, your protocols. He's been listening to everything. The implications hit me like cold water. Our radio communications weren't private. Every status report, every location update, every request for backup. He'd heard it all. He knew exactly where we were going, and that no help was coming. I examined the radio without touching it. Fresh batteries, channel set to park service frequency, volume turned low. Recently used. How long has this been happening? The watching, the gifts? Since my second day. At first I thought I was imagining things. Equipment moved a few inches, sounds in the distance. Then he started getting bolder. Personal items from my pack rearranged. My tent moved to a different location while I was collecting samples. Always when I wasn't looking directly. Why didn't you hike out? Return to your vehicle? Iris laughed, a sound with no humor in it. I tried. 3 times. The trails, they change. Paths I knew were there disappear. New ones appear, leading deeper into the forest. It's like he's herding me, keeping me in a specific area. Trail obstruction, another classic hunting technique. Block obvious escape routes, funnel prey toward areas that offer tactical advantages. We left the radio and continued toward what I hoped was the main trail. But Iris was right about the paths changing. Markers I'd noted on the way in were gone. Blazes on trees had been altered or covered. The landscape itself seemed to shift when we weren't looking directly at it. There, Iris whispered, pointing ahead, a piece of orange surveyor's tape tied to a branch at eye level. Fresh, bright against the dark bark. It hadn't been there when I'd passed the same tree an hour earlier. Tied to the tape was a laminated photograph. The image showed 2 people in ranger uniforms, a man and woman standing beside a Park Service vehicle. They were smiling, relaxed, unaware of the camera. The photo quality suggested it had been taken with a telephoto lens from a significant distance. I recognized the male ranger. Tom Breslin worked the North District. The woman was someone I didn't know. Older uniform style, maybe from several years ago. Iris was reading something written on the back of the photo. Her face went white. What does it say? She handed it to me with shaking fingers, written in careful block letters. Ranger Breslin, missing Sep 2018. Ranger Chen, missing July 2017. You're next. 2 missing rangers. 2 people with training, equipment, and knowledge of wilderness survival, both vanished without a trace. We need to move. Now. But as we turned to leave, I heard something that made my blood freeze, my own voice calling from somewhere in the trees ahead of us. Iris? Iris, where are you? I'm Ranger Blackwood. Your university contacted us when you missed your check-in. The exact words I'd used when I found her. Perfect inflection, perfect timing, being played back like a recording. Then another voice, older, male. Base, this is Ranger Breslin. Beginning search pattern North 7. Will report status in 2 hours. And a third voice, female. Request immediate backup. Have located missing hiker. Condition unknown. Our hunter had been collecting voices, recording radio transmissions, conversations, probably for months or years. Building a library of sounds to use for psychological warfare. He's hurting us, I whispered. Driving us somewhere specific. Iris nodded. Always the same direction. Always deeper into the forest, away from roads and trails. Where? What's in that direction? I don't know, but there are structures. Old buildings, maybe from logging operations. And smell. She didn't need to elaborate. I caught it too now, carried on the wind. Sweet, cloying organic decay. Not the clean smell of natural decomposition, but something else. Something that spoke to the primitive part of the human brain that recognizes death. We had to make a choice. continue toward the main trail, where our hunter was obviously driving us, or strike off in a completely different direction and risk getting lost in trackless wilderness. How's your ankle? It hurts, but I can manage. What are you thinking? We go east, straight through unmarked forest, forget trails, forget his games, make our own path. It was a desperate plan. The forest to the east was dense, unmapped, full of deadfalls and hidden ravines. In good weather, with proper equipment, it would be challenging. In rain, with limited visibility and an injured companion, it was nearly suicidal. But staying on the established trails meant playing by his rules, walking into whatever trap he'd spent days preparing. We turned east and plunged into virgin forest. The terrain was nightmarish. Fallen trees created barriers 15 feet high that forced exhausting detours. Streams ran through hidden valleys that appeared without warning. The canopy was so thick that we navigated by compass, unable to see more than 20 yards in any direction. But for the first time since I'd found Iris, I felt like we were making our own choices instead of following a predetermined path. That feeling lasted about an hour. We were resting beside a small creek, Iris soaking her injured ankle in the cold water, when I noticed the arrangement. Stones, 7 of them, placed in a perfect circle around a space of bare earth. Each stone was approximately the same size, clearly selected and positioned, not a natural formation. In the center of the circle, someone had placed a small pile of items, personal effects, a wristwatch, reading glasses, a wedding ring, car keys, old items, weathered by seasons of exposure. Trophies, Iris whispered. I approached the circle carefully, noting that the earth inside was discolored, stained dark. The smell was stronger here, mixed with something metallic that made my stomach clench. One of the items caught my attention. A Park Service radio, older model, with T. Breslin etched into the plastic casing. Tom Breslin, the ranger from the photograph, missing since September 2018. We need to leave now. But as I turned away from the circle, I saw him. A figure standing motionless between 2 massive cedar trees, maybe 50 yards away, partially obscured by shadows and hanging moss, but unmistakably human. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like military fatigues. He stood perfectly still, watching us. When I blinked, he was gone. Did you see that? Iris nodded, her face pale. He does that, appears and disappears, like he knows the forest better than we know our own homes. We ran, crashing through undergrowth, splashing across streams, fighting through barriers of fallen timber. Iris's ankle slowed us down, but adrenaline gave her strength she shouldn't have had. Behind us, I could hear sounds of pursuit, not the obvious noise of someone crashing through the forest, but subtle indicators of movement, branches settling after being disturbed, sounds of footsteps that seemed to come from multiple directions. He wasn't just following us. He was surrounding us. The forest opened into a small clearing, and we stopped to catch our breath. My GPS unit showed we'd traveled almost 2 miles east of the main trail system. Deep wilderness, no established paths for miles in any direction. We're lost, Iris gasped. I checked my compass, trying to calculate a bearing back toward the road system, but the needle spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. The device had worked perfectly that morning. Equipment failure, I muttered, but I knew better. Our hunter had technology, resources, and knowledge we didn't understand. Compass manipulation was basic electronic warfare. That's when we heard the sounds. Voices coming from multiple directions. My voice. We need to leave. Now. Iris's voice. He knows I'm here. Other voices I didn't recognize, some pleading, some screaming, some laughing with an edge of hysteria. Recordings, I said, but my conviction was wavering. The voices seemed to move through the forest, sometimes near, sometimes distant. And they were saying things I'd never heard before, conversations that had never happened. Unless they had happened, and I was forgetting. Unless something was wrong with my memory, my perception of time. Ezra. Iris grabbed my arm. Look at your watch. 4:30 p.m. But that was impossible. We'd left her shelter around 2 p.m., traveled for maybe 2 hours. Simple arithmetic said it should be 4 p.m. at most. Except my watch read 4:30, and the light filtering through the canopy suggested late afternoon moving toward evening. Missing time. Either we'd been moving slower than I thought, or something had happened during our journey east that I couldn't remember. How long were we at the stone circle? 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then we've lost an hour somewhere. Iris stared at me with growing horror. What if he drugged us? Hallucinogens, something to affect our perception. Possible. Plenty of natural compounds in the Pacific Northwest could alter consciousness. Or synthetic drugs delivered through contaminated water, food, even absorbed through skin contact. That would explain the compass, the missing time, maybe even some of the voices. But it didn't explain the stone circle, the personal effects, the systematic stalking that had been going on for days before I arrived. Darkness was coming. In October, the sun set by 6 p.m., and under the forest canopy, full darkness would arrive even earlier. We had maybe 90 minutes of usable light left. We need shelter, somewhere we can defend. There's a place, Iris said quietly. I found it yesterday before you arrived. Old logging camp, maybe from the 1940s. Some of the buildings are still intact. How far? Maybe half a mile north, but Ezra, I don't think we should go there. Why not? Because I think that's where he wants us to go. Everything he's done, every choice he's given us, it all pushes in that direction. Like he's been herding us toward those buildings since the beginning. She was right. Our hunter had been playing a long game, manipulating our decisions, creating the illusion of choice while actually controlling our movements. The stone circle, the missing time, even my arrival in the forest, all part of a plan we didn't understand. But darkness was coming. Iris was injured and we had no other options. Then we give him what he wants. But we do it on our terms. The old logging camp materialized out of the forest like something from a fever dream. 5 wooden buildings arranged around a central clearing, constructed from massive cedar logs that had somehow resisted decades of Pacific Northwest weather. Most of the roofs had partially collapsed, but the main structure, probably the crew quarters, remained intact, and it was obviously occupied. Fresh repairs on the largest building, new boards covering broken windows, a thin stream of smoke rising from a metal chimney, firewood stacked neatly under a corrugated metal lean-to. He lives here, Iris whispered, or wants us to think he does. I studied the camp through binoculars, looking for signs of ambush, trap, or deception. The buildings were positioned to create natural choke points, with clear fields of fire from the main structure. Classic defensive arrangement. But I also noticed something else. Solar panels on the roof of one building, barely visible under camouflage netting. A radio antenna disguised as a dead tree branch. This wasn't just a shelter, it was a base of operations. Professional setup, military training. The ranger who went missing, Breslin, his file said he was former Army. Special Forces? I don't know, but if our hunter has that kind of training... She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Rangers received good wilderness training, but nothing compared to military special operations. If we were up against someone with that skill set, our chances of survival had just dropped to nearly 0. But we were out of choices. Darkness was 20 minutes away. Iris could barely walk, and we had no idea where we were in relation to roads or rescue. I circled the camp at a distance looking for additional structures, escape routes, and potential threats. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Behind the main camp, almost hidden in the forest, was another clearing. This one contained what looked like a training facility. Obstacle course made from fallen logs. Shooting range with targets at various distances. And something that made my blood run cold. A mock-up of a Park Service vehicle complete with radio equipment. Our hunter had been practicing, rehearsing scenarios, learning ranger protocols and procedures. But practicing for what? I found my answer at the edge of the training area. A series of wooden posts driven into the ground, each bearing a metal plate. Names and dates etched into the metal. Ranger Chen, July 2017. Ranger Breslin, September 2018. Hiker Martinez, March 2019. Researcher Powell, June 2019. 7 plates total. 7 victims over 3 years, and at the end of the row, 2 fresh posts with blank plates, waiting for new names. I returned to Iris with the knowledge that we weren't just being hunted. We were being inducted into a collection. The main building had a covered porch and a heavy wooden door that looked like it belonged on a fortress. I approached from the side, staying in shadows, listening for sounds of occupancy. Nothing. No voices. No movement. No indication that anyone was inside. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open slowly. Emergency flare in one hand, knife in the other. The interior was larger than I'd expected. One main room with a stone fireplace and sleeping area. Military-style organization. Everything clean, orderly, functional, and empty, but not unoccupied. Fresh coffee in a metal cup on the table. Wet boots by the door. Radio equipment that was still warm to the touch. On the table, arranged in a neat display, were items I recognized. My backup radio batteries, Iris's research notebooks, my GPS unit, the one that had been malfunctioning all day, and photographs, dozens of them, pictures of me arriving at the trailhead that morning, images of Iris at her research sites over the past week, long-range surveillance photos of other rangers, hikers, researchers, some recent, some obviously taken months or years ago. But what stopped my heart were the photos at the bottom of the stack, pictures of the stone circle. But not as we'd found it that afternoon. These showed the circle being constructed, bodies being arranged, personal effects being placed as trophies, and in several photos a figure in military fatigues overseeing the process. Face obscured by shadows, but posture and build suggesting someone comfortable with violence, organized in its application. The photos were dated. The most recent was from 3 days ago. The same day Iris had stopped checking in. Looking for something specific? The voice came from directly behind me. I spun around, flare raised, to find a man standing in the doorway. Tall, lean, wearing military fatigues that looked like they'd seen actual combat. Face weathered by years of outdoor living. Eyes that held intelligence and something else. Amusement. "You must be Ranger Blackwood. I've been looking forward to meeting you." I kept the flare between us, finger on the trigger. "Where's Iris?" "Safe. For now. Depends on how cooperative you decide to be." "What do you want?" He smiled, and I saw that several of his teeth were missing. Old injuries, poorly healed. "What I want is to show you something, about the nature of predation, about who really rules the wilderness. You're the one who's been killing rangers." "Killing? No, Ranger Blackwood. I've been teaching them, about their limitations, about what happens when training meets reality." He moved further into the room and I noticed he wasn't carrying obvious weapons. But his hands, his posture, everything about him suggested he didn't need weapons to be lethal. "The others, Chen and Breslin, where are they?" "Learning. Still learning after all this time. Would you like to see them?" Before I could respond, he gestured toward a door I hadn't noticed, partially hidden behind a hanging tarp. "They're in the back room, both very eager to meet you." Every instinct screamed at me not to follow him, but if there was a chance the missing rangers were alive. The back room was smaller, dimmer, lit only by battery-powered lanterns, and it contained horrors I'm still trying to forget. 2 figures sat against the far wall, bound with military-style restraints, alive but barely recognizable as the people they'd once been. Months or years of captivity had reduced them to shells, broken psychologically in ways that medical science might not be able to repair. "Ranger Chen, Ranger Breslin, say hello to your colleague." Neither responded. Couldn't respond. Whatever had been done to them had taken away their ability to function as human beings. "What did you do to them?" "Taught them about helplessness, about what happens when all your training, all your equipment, all your confidence gets stripped away piece by piece. It's quite educational." I raised the flare. "Let them go." "Or what?" You'll burn down my home? Alert rescue services who can't find you anyway? He laughed. Ranger Blackwood, you still don't understand. There is no rescue coming. There is no escape from this forest. There is only what I allow to happen. The radio transmissions, you've been jamming our communications. Among other things, military electronic warfare training has many applications. Your people at the ranger station think you're following normal search protocols. They won't expect your next check-in for hours. Hours we didn't have. Hours that would give him time to do to us what he'd done to Chen and Breslin. What about Iris? Your research friend is safe, for now. She's been quite useful as bait. Amazing how protective instincts make people predictable. Bait. Of course. Everything from the beginning had been designed to lure rescue personnel into his territory. Iris's disappearance, her equipment being moved, even her calls for help. All part of an elaborate trap. Why? What's the point of all this? His expression changed, became something colder and more focused. The point is demonstrating that civilization is an illusion. That when you strip away technology, backup, and social support, humans revert to their basic nature. Predator and prey. You're insane. Am I? Look around you, Ranger Blackwood. I've survived in this wilderness for over 3 years. I've successfully hunted and captured trained professionals. I've created a sustainable operation that provides everything I need. Which one of us is better adapted to reality? He had a point, twisted as it was. By conventional measures of wilderness survival, he was succeeding where civilization had failed. But success built on human suffering wasn't evolution, it was pathology. The missing persons reports. Eventually someone will investigate. Will they? Chen and Breslin were reported as equipment failures, weather accidents. Your friend Iris will be listed as a research accident. You'll be reported as a rescue attempt gone wrong. The Olympic Peninsula is dangerous territory. People disappear here all the time. True. The Forest Service reported dozens of missing persons every year. Most were eventually found, but a significant percentage simply vanished without explanation. If he was careful, selective, patient, he could continue this operation indefinitely. But I'm not patient anymore, he continued as if reading my thoughts. 3 years of small-scale operations. Time to expand. Test larger groups. See how team dynamics change when multiple people are hunted simultaneously. Multiple people. He wasn't just planning to kill us. He was planning to use us as proof of concept for something larger. The research station. You're going after the research station. Olympic National Park operated a remote research facility that housed up to 20 scientists during peak seasons. Isolated, limited communication. Perfect target for someone with his skills and resources. Very good. Your friend Iris provided excellent intelligence about research schedules, security protocols, communication procedures. Quite cooperative once properly motivated. Motivated. I didn't want to think about what that meant. The station has security, armed personnel. He smiled again, that cold expression that made my skin crawl. Security guards trained for wildlife encounters and drunk tourists, not for military-level psychological warfare. Besides, I won't be working alone anymore. Working alone. The implication hit me like ice water. You're recruiting. Training. There's a difference. Chen and Breslin have learned to be quite useful once their resistance was properly broken. Amazing what people will do when survival becomes their only concern. I looked again at the 2 figures against the wall. In the dim light, I could see they were wearing modified Park Service uniforms. Clean, pressed, maintained. They'd been turned into some kind of twisted parody of their former selves. Stockholm Syndrome. Evolutionary adaptation. They've learned that cooperation ensures survival, while resistance ensures suffering. Basic behavioral conditioning. The flare was getting heavy in my hand, but I didn't dare lower it. It was the only thing standing between me and whatever had been done to the other rangers. What about Iris? What's her role in your research station plan? Dr. Delacroix has already provided detailed intelligence about research schedules, personnel rotations, and security protocols. She'll continue to be useful as long as she remains cooperative. And if she stops being cooperative? His expression answered that question without words. I had to end this. But 2 people were already broken beyond repair. Iris was somewhere in his control, and I was alone in his territory with minimal equipment. Fighting him directly would be suicide. Unless... The memorial posts. 7 victims over 3 years. But you only have 2 prisoners here. Something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance, maybe even anger. The others weren't suitable for long-term training. Unfortunate, but necessary for the research. Research. You keep calling it research. Behavioral study of human responses to extreme stress. How quickly civilized people revert to survival instincts. What psychological techniques are most effective for breaking down resistance. All very scientific. Insane. But organized insanity, systematic and methodical, which made him infinitely more dangerous than a simple killer. Show me the rest. Excuse me. If you want to recruit me, demonstrate me, whatever you call it, show me the whole operation. I want to understand what I'm dealing with. He studied me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating, weighing the risks of showing me more against the potential benefits of having another trained ranger in his collection. Very well, but first, a small demonstration of the consequences of resistance. He moved to a metal cabinet in the corner and withdrew something that made my stomach clench. A military-style radio, obviously modified with additional equipment. Chen, Breslin, stand up. Both figures immediately rose, moving with the mechanical precision of people whose will had been completely broken. They stood at attention, eyes fixed on some point in the distance. Chen, report on today's perimeter patrol. The woman who had once been Ranger Chen began speaking in a flat, emotionless voice. Perimeter secure. No unauthorized personnel detected. Wildlife activity normal. Equipment functioning within parameters. She'd been turned into a human surveillance device, broken down and rebuilt as a tool for his operation. Breslin, status of communications monitoring. All Park Service frequencies monitored. No unusual activity detected. Research station maintains normal check-in schedule. Weather Service reports storm system approaching from northwest. They'd been transformed into extensions of his capabilities. Additional eyes and ears with ranger training and knowledge of Park Service procedures. Impressive, isn't it? What can be accomplished with proper motivation and training techniques? You mean torture? I mean education. They've learned the fundamental truth about human nature, that survival is the only thing that ultimately matters. Everything else is cultural conditioning that can be stripped away. They're not human anymore. They're more human than they've ever been, reduced to their essential nature without the comfortable lies of civilization. I was looking at my future if I failed. Mental destruction so complete that I'd become a willing participant in hunting other people. What happens tomorrow morning when the research station expects Iris's normal check-in? She'll provide it, along with a request for emergency assistance. Medical emergency, equipment failure, something that requires immediate response from multiple personnel. They'll send a rescue team. They'll send subjects for advanced behavioral studies. The research station currently houses 12 researchers plus support staff, all potential candidates for educational opportunities. 12 people. An entire research facility that would disappear without explanation, their disappearances attributed to weather accidents and equipment failures. What about witnesses? People who might survive to report what happened? There won't be any witnesses. That's fundamental to maintaining operational security. No witnesses, meaning everyone involved would either be killed or broken down into tools for future use. Including us. Including you, if your usefulness expires. Dr. Delacroix has more long-term value due to her research credentials and academic connections. Academic connections? University faculty, research institutions, grant committees. People who could provide intelligence about other potential subjects or operational opportunities. You're planning to expand into academic institutions. Universities provide excellent laboratories for behavioral studies, isolated research facilities, subjects with high intelligence and specialized knowledge, administrative structures that can be easily disrupted. I was looking at someone who'd found a way to turn the entire academic and research community into hunting grounds for psychological experiments. The research station attack. When? Tomorrow morning. Dr. Delacroix will contact them requesting emergency medical assistance. When the rescue team arrives, they'll find themselves in a carefully prepared educational environment. What's my role in this? Observer initially. Your educational progress will be assessed based on your responses to various research activities. What kind of responses are you looking for? Adaptation to new information, acceptance of alternative moral frameworks, willingness to participate in activities that advance collective knowledge, even when they conflict with individual ethical preferences. Individual ethical preferences. He was describing basic human morality as a personal opinion that could be discarded when inconvenient. What if I can't adapt? Then your educational requirements will be adjusted accordingly. Some subjects respond well to observational learning. Others require more direct intervention. Direct intervention? Personal experience with the same conditioning techniques being applied to other subjects. Nothing advances understanding like first-hand knowledge. You'd torture me to make me compliant. I'd provide you with educational opportunities designed to accelerate your understanding of fundamental behavioral principles. A device around my neck pulsed softly. I hadn't noticed him placing some kind of electronic collar while we talked, but now I could feel its weight, its gentle electrical current monitoring my vital signs. Insurance, he explained, to ensure you remain focused on education rather than escape. The collar could read my stress levels, probably deliver punishment if it detected resistance or escape attempts. What happens if I try to remove it? Tamper-evident systems trigger maximum corrective response. Removal attempts result in severe educational intervention. Perfect technology for creating absolute compliance through constant surveillance and immediate punishment. Dr. Delacroix is being prepared for tomorrow's performance. You'll spend the night in secure quarters, giving you time to consider the benefits of cooperation versus the consequences of resistance. Chen moved forward to escort me, and I realized this might be the last time I saw Iris as herself. Tomorrow's operation would either kill us both or transform us into something unrecognizable. Chen led me to a small room furnished with basic amenities: cot, blanket, water container. Everything needed to keep a research subject functional, but nothing that could be used as weapons or escape tools. Accommodation resources are provided, Chen announced in her flat voice. Sleep cycle should begin within 2 hours for optimal performance preparation. Chen, do you remember who you used to be? She stared at me with empty eyes, processing the question like a computer analyzing unfamiliar data. Previous identity parameters are irrelevant to current operational requirements. Educational objectives focus on present functionality rather than historical psychological patterns. Do you remember your family, your children? Family unit connections were terminated as part of advanced educational protocols. Current social structure consists of operational team members and research subjects. Your children are still alive. They miss you. They think you're dead. Previous emotional attachments were incompatible with operational requirements. Educational intervention successfully eliminated non-functional psychological patterns. I was talking to someone who'd been systematically stripped of every aspect of human connection, not just memory, but the capacity to understand why those connections had ever mattered. She left, sealing the door behind her with an electronic lock. I was alone in a cell, monitored by devices that could read my thoughts and punish me for having the wrong emotional responses. But I was still me. Still capable of planning, thinking, remembering why human connection mattered more than survival. The collar around my neck pulsed gently, monitoring my stress levels, but it couldn't read specific thoughts. Only the physiological responses those thoughts generated. I lay down on the cot and forced my breathing to slow. Meditation techniques adapted for psychological warfare against an electronic monitor. The research station had emergency protocols I hadn't mentioned. Backup communication systems, automated distress beacons, redundant safety measures. If a rescue team disappeared, multiple agencies would respond within hours. And I knew something else he didn't know. The research station was currently hosting a joint training exercise with military search and rescue personnel. Instead of 12 civilian researchers, there were 25 people, including active-duty military with combat experience. If I could find a way to warn them, the response wouldn't be another vulnerable rescue team. It would be a full-scale military operation. The radio contact tomorrow morning was my only opportunity. I had to embed a warning that would alert military personnel without being obvious to someone monitoring the conversation. Hours passed. Around 3 a.m., I heard vehicles approaching. Our captor's observers were arriving to document tomorrow's demonstration. I moved to the window carefully. 3 vehicles in military-style camouflage. Personnel in tactical gear with professional surveillance equipment. Not academic observers. These were people with military or intelligence backgrounds, which meant the operation had official backing. Government agencies or defense contractors interested in field testing psychological warfare techniques. At dawn, Chen unlocked my door. Subject will proceed to briefing location for final coordination protocols. I followed her to the communications center, where our captor was conducting final equipment checks. The observation team was positioned nearby. Recording equipment active. Ranger Blackwood, excellent. Dr. Delacroix is being prepared for her performance. Iris was brought in by Breslin. She'd clearly spent the night in psychological preparation, but with less success at maintaining stability. Her face was pale, hands shaking, eyes holding desperate fear. Ezra, I can't do this. I can't help them hurt innocent people. Dr. Delacroix, our captor interrupted. Your performance anxiety is understandable but counterproductive. He activated a tablet displaying surveillance footage. The research station recorded from concealed positions, people going about normal activities, unaware they were being watched. 25 individuals currently at the research facility. Researchers, support staff, and military personnel conducting joint training exercises. All potential subjects for advanced behavioral studies. Military personnel. He knew about the joint training exercise. The medical evacuation request will trigger response from enhanced personnel with military training and equipment. Even more valuable subjects for psychological research. He activated another display showing real-time surveillance of what looked like a residential area. Your sister's neighborhood in Portland, Dr. Sarah Delacroix, age 34, works as a pediatric nurse at OHSU. Leaves for work at 07:30 every morning, takes the same route. Iris went white. You're watching my sister? We're conducting comprehensive background research on all subjects. Dr. Sarah's professional schedule makes her quite accessible for educational opportunities if alternative motivation becomes necessary. Using her sister as leverage. Devastatingly effective psychological manipulation. Iris, do what he says, I said quietly. Exactly what he says, exactly how he says it. She nodded, understanding that her sister's life depended on her performance. Dr. Delacroix, you'll initiate contact at exactly 0800 hours. Ranger Blackwood will provide technical corroboration. You'll report severe allergic reaction to an unknown plant toxin requiring immediate helicopter evacuation. They'll ask for specific vital signs. Heart rate 130, blood pressure 90/60, respiratory rate 24, oxygen saturation 88%. Ranger Blackwood will confirm these readings and provide additional technical details. 10 minutes until the radio contact that would determine whether we became willing participants in mass murder or found some way to prevent it. Communication commences now, our captor announced, handing Iris the radio microphone. She looked at me one more time, then keyed the microphone. Olympic Research Station, this is Dr. Iris Delacroix. I have a medical emergency and need immediate helicopter evacuation. The radio crackled with response. Dr. Delacroix, this is Olympic Station Control. We copy your emergency. Please describe your current condition and location. Iris pressed the key with trembling fingers. I'm experiencing severe allergic reaction to an unknown plant toxin. Facial swelling, difficulty breathing, dropping blood pressure. I'm with Ranger Blackwood at GPS coordinates. She provided the coordinates our captor had given her. Copy, Dr. Delacroix. Stand by for medical consultation. Ranger Blackwood, are you on station? This was it. My moment to either warn them or doom them. Olympic Station, This is Ranger Blackwood on scene with Dr. Delacroix. I paused, controlling my stress levels while embedding the first military distress code. Patient condition is deteriorating rapidly. Request immediate dust-off for priority medical transport. Dust-off. Vietnam-era terminology for medical helicopter evacuation under hostile conditions. Military personnel would recognize it as significant. Ranger Blackwood, can you provide vital signs and current symptoms? Heart rate 130, blood pressure 90/60, respiratory rate 24, oxygen saturation 88%. I paused, then added, advise you bring heavy package for extended recovery time. Heavy package. Military code for combat medical equipment and armed personnel. Copy vital signs, Ranger Blackwood. Medical team is preparing for immediate launch. ETA approximately 45 minutes. Negative Olympic Station. Patient condition is rapidly deteriorating. We'll need your best crew for this extraction. Another pause. Recommend you contact higher authority for operational clearance. Higher authority. Military terminology indicating the situation required command-level decision-making. Understood, Ranger Blackwood. Medical team launching immediately with full equipment package. I just embedded 3 military distress codes in routine medical communication. If there were military personnel at the research station, they'd recognize the warnings and prepare accordingly. Excellent performance, our captor said. 45 minutes until arrival. Final positioning and equipment activation will commence immediately. But his carefully prepared trap might become a combat engagement he wasn't prepared for. We were positioned at the designated landing zone, surrounded by concealed observers with recording equipment. Everything ready for the approaching demonstration. The sound of rotors carried across the forest, growing stronger. Through the trees, I could see aircraft lights moving toward our position. Helicopter on final approach, an observer reported. Military-style aircraft, larger crew than anticipated. Military-style aircraft. My coded warnings had been understood. Larger crew? 8 personnel visible, standard medical crew plus additional support personnel. Additional support personnel, combat troops. Our captor frowned, realizing something didn't match his expectations. Contingency Protocol 2. Enhanced security measures and accelerated operational timeline. The helicopter circled the landing zone twice, reconnaissance pattern suggesting they were assessing potential threats. They're being cautious. Standard military protocol for uncertain situations. The helicopter wasn't landing at the designated zone. Instead, it moved to an alternative site outside the prepared ambush perimeter. They're landing at alternate LZ, outside operational control area. My warning signals had worked. Military personnel had recognized the threat indicators and adapted accordingly. Mobile response to alternate landing zone. Maintain operational initiative. But the observers were no longer in prepared positions. They were improvising against military personnel expecting hostile contact. Through the trees, I could see personnel exiting the helicopter in tactical formation. Military bearing, combat equipment, coordinated movement. 8 personnel confirmed, 4 medical, 4 combat support. Full military loadout including communications equipment and heavy weapons. Enhanced response protocol. All positions advance on alternate LZ. But they were walking into a situation they weren't prepared for. Military personnel with superior equipment and training. Tom, I whispered to Breslin, hoping some fragment of his former self remained. Can you remember who you used to be? For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not recognition, but confusion. Previous professional relationships were terminated through educational channels. Tom, you saved my life during that training exercise. Remember? You told me about Rebecca, your fiancée. Rebecca? He whispered, hand moving unconsciously toward his chest pocket. She's still waiting for you. She thinks you died, but she never gave up hope. Rebecca. She said she'd wait. She said love was stronger than fear. His conditioning was fighting against memories that refused to stay buried. Tom, people are going to die today. You can choose to save them or help destroy them. I remember. Protect and serve. That was what I believed. You can still choose to be human. He nodded, then moved toward equipment stations. To observers, he looked like he was performing assigned tasks, but he was actually modifying approach markers, creating signals that would warn military personnel of hostile presence. The helicopter sound was getting closer. Whatever was about to happen would determine our fate. Helicopter approaching from southeast, ETA 5 minutes. But as the aircraft approached, it wasn't following standard medical evacuation patterns. The crew had recognized Tom's warning signals and were conducting tactical assessment. Something's wrong. They're not following standard approach patterns. Circling at tactical altitude, multiple reconnaissance passes. This looks like combat approach rather than medical evacuation. Our captor realized his trap was becoming something more dangerous. All positions maintain concealment. Wait for my signal. But the helicopter landed at the alternate site, outside his operational control. Military personnel exited in combat formation, taking defensive positions. Tom activated a handheld radio, switching to military frequency. Hostile positions. 6 personnel with automatic weapons, electronic jamming active. Recommend immediate tactical response. The response was immediate. Military personnel shifted to combat formation, neutralizing the observer's tactical advantage. What the hell? How are they receiving tactical information? His operation was falling apart. All positions abort. Immediate withdrawal to secondary positions. But the observers were caught in open ground, exposed to military personnel who now knew their locations. "Contact! Contact!" one shouted as soldiers opened fire. The forest erupted in gunfire as trained military engaged the observers who'd expected to ambush medical personnel. Tom grabbed the collar control device, switching off the punishment systems. Collars deactivated, subjects are free to move. I pulled the dead collar from my neck and ran toward Iris, who was struggling with Chen. "Chen," Tom shouted, "remember who you used to be. Remember your daughters." Dr. Chen stopped, confusion replacing mechanical compliance. I had children. 2 daughters, Sarah and Emma." "That's right. You have daughters who miss you." "My daughters. Are they safe?" "They think you're dead, but they're safe. And they need you to stay human." Chen turned toward our captor, human rage breaking through systematic conditioning. "You told me my children were dead. You made me forget them." She hit him with maternal fury that had survived torture. He went down hard. "We need to leave," I said. "The military will secure this area." But our captor activated a final contingency. If operational objectives cannot be achieved, eliminate all evidence. Explosives. He was going to destroy everything. "Run!" We ran through the forest as systematic explosions began destroying buildings and evidence. Behind us, the camp was being erased from existence. But ahead through the trees I could see military personnel establishing a secure perimeter. "U.S. military personnel," Tom called out. "We're the missing civilians. Hands visible. Move slowly. Identify yourselves. Ranger Tom Breslin, Olympic National Park. Ranger Ezra Blackwood. Dr. Iris Delacroix. Dr. Amanda Chen." "Breslin, you're supposed to be dead." "I was captured, held by hostile personnel. These people rescued me." The military medic assessed our condition, noting signs of prolonged stress and psychological trauma. "We need immediate evacuation to secure medical facility. These people have been through extended hostile captivity." As we were loaded into the military helicopter, I looked back at the burning remains of the camp where we'd almost been transformed into willing participants in mass murder. The explosions had eliminated most evidence, but we were living witnesses to what had happened. Our testimony would expose the operation. But I knew our captor was still alive, still planning expanded operations. The helicopter lifted off, carrying us toward safety and the beginning of a long recovery process. But even as we flew toward rescue, I understood this wasn't over. 4 years later. 3 in the morning. That's when I wake up now, in my Arizona house 1,000 miles from Olympic National Park, when the nightmares bring me back to that forest and the knowledge that somewhere, People like our captor are still conducting their educational experiments. Tom Breslin recovered enough to return to limited duty, though he'll never be the same. Dr. Chen was reunited with her daughters, but the psychological scars will take years to heal. Iris left research entirely, works as a data analyst in Portland now, close to her sister. The federal investigation found evidence of the operation, but our captor's body was never recovered. The observers who survived claimed they were conducting legitimate research and had no knowledge of illegal activities. No one was ever prosecuted. But 6 months after our escape, Tom received a package with no return address. A photograph of Rebecca, taken from a distance. On the back, Dr. Chen's daughters, Sarah age 8, Emma age 6, attend Evergreen Elementary. The message was clear. Cooperation with authorities would result in loved ones becoming subjects for behavioral studies. Chen moved her family to an undisclosed location. Tom relocated to the East Coast. They're married now, but he checks locks 3 times every night and keeps weapons within reach. I moved to Arizona because the desert is the opposite of that forest. Open spaces, clear sight lines, no shadows deep enough to hide predators. But the nightmares still come. Always at 3 in the morning. My wife thinks I should let it go. That dwelling on the past prevents healing. She doesn't understand that forgetting would be betraying everyone who didn't escape. I still check missing persons reports from wilderness areas. The patterns are there if you know how to look. Clusters of disappearances in remote areas, followed by months of no activity, then new clusters hundreds of miles away. 3 weeks ago, I received my own package, a photograph of my house, taken from the desert hills. On the back, Mrs. Blackwood teaches 3rd grade at Desert Ridge Elementary, works late most evenings. My wife's school, her schedule, her vulnerabilities. I haven't told her about the photograph, haven't explained why I insist on driving her to work every day. Haven't shared my concerns about the new janitor who started last month. Tall, lean, moving with fluid grace that suggests military training. I keep weapons in every room now. Security systems that would impress dictators. Contingency plans for immediate evacuation. My wife thinks I'm losing my mind. She's suggested therapy, medication, maybe a vacation somewhere peaceful. Somewhere peaceful, like the Olympic Peninsula. I can't explain that there is no somewhere peaceful, that predators understand how to exploit protective instincts anywhere. That's why I'm telling this story now. Not because I've found peace, but because silence enables continuation of operations that are expanding in scope and sophistication. Somewhere tonight, people are disappearing into wilderness areas where they'll become subjects for advanced behavioral studies. Families are receiving reports of equipment failures that explain why loved ones will never come home. This isn't over. It's an ongoing operation that continues because most people can't believe humans are capable of systematic evil on this scale. But we are capable. History is full of organized atrocity disguised as scientific research. If you're hiking in wilderness areas, be aware that not all dangers come from animals. Some come from people who view isolated locations as perfect laboratories. If someone you care about goes missing, ask hard questions. Push for thorough investigations. If you work in research or emergency services, question unusual requests. Verify credentials. Maintain communication. And if you ever find yourself where cooperation seems like the only way to protect people you love, remember that predators rely on protective instincts to maintain control. Sometimes the most loving thing is refusing to enable harm to others. I don't know if our captor will come for my wife, for Tom's family, for new victims we've never met, but I know he's still out there, still conducting educational research, until someone stops him. Until someone finds the courage to look directly at human evil and refuse to turn away. The Olympic Peninsula is beautiful country, but it's also hunting ground for predators who've learned to disguise systematic evil as scientific advancement. Be careful out there. Trust your instincts. Maintain communication. And remember that the most dangerous predators are the ones who've learned to disguise evil as education. My name is Ezra Blackwood. I was a forest ranger until I learned that some educational opportunities are designed to destroy everything that makes us human. This is my testimony. This is my warning. This is what happened in the Olympic Peninsula. and why I'll never sleep peacefully again. Final testimony recorded November 15, 2023, Phoenix, Arizona. Ezra Blackwood was found dead in his home 3 days after completing this account. Official cause of death: apparent suicide by gunshot. His wife reported increasing paranoia and delusion in recent months. No note was found. Audio files were discovered on his computer by federal investigators. The events described have not been independently verified, and several details appear inconsistent with official records. This account is being released as part of ongoing research into trauma-related psychological disorders affecting wilderness rescue personnel. Three in the morning. It's always 3 in the morning when I wake up hearing those sounds again. My new house is over 1,000 miles from Olympic National Park, but still, I still hear them. The rain on cedar branches, the way boots sound on wet moss when they're trying to be quiet. My wife says they're just nightmares. She wasn't there. She didn't see what I saw that October night when the Washington wilderness taught me that humans are the apex predator. My name is Caleb Torino, and I need to tell someone this story. I've been in therapy for 2 years now, ever since I moved here to Nebraska. My therapist says talking about it might help, but I've never told the complete story to anyone. Not even her, not even my wife. Some details you keep locked away because speaking them out loud makes them real again. I was 28 when it happened, been a forest ranger for about 18 months. Still new enough to feel like I had something to prove, you know? Olympic National Park in Washington was my first real assignment after training. Coming from Iowa originally, those ancient forests felt like another planet. The Douglas firs and Sitka spruces rising 300 feet into perpetual mist, the understory so thick with ferns and moss that sound gets swallowed before it travels 10 feet. Nebraska, where I live now, is all open sky and cornfields stretching to the horizon. My wife thinks I moved here for the job opportunities, but that's not true. I moved here because you can see everything coming from miles away. There's nowhere to hide in Nebraska. No shadows deep enough to conceal what I saw in those Washington woods. It was October 15, 2021, when the call came in about Iris Valdemar, 34 years old, marine biologist from Seattle. She'd been conducting some kind of unauthorized research on old-growth ecosystems in the Hoh River area. Her department at the University of Washington reported her missing when she failed to return from what was supposed to be a 3-day solo research trip. The last ping from her satellite communicator placed her about 12 miles up the Hoh River Trail in one of the most remote sections of the park. I remember being excited when my supervisor, Ranger Martinez, assigned me as the lead on the search operation. This was it, my chance to prove I belonged out there. I'd studied every search and rescue protocol, memorized topographical maps, practiced with all the equipment until I could operate it blindfolded. I thought I was ready for anything the forest could throw at me. The first day started normal enough. October in the Olympic Peninsula means the rainy season is just beginning. The morning air was crisp, maybe 45 degrees, with that particular smell of wet cedar and decomposing leaves that defines Pacific Northwest autumn. The kind of cold that seeps through your jacket and settles in your bones, but not unpleasant if you're dressed right. I had full kit: GPS unit, emergency radio, satellite phone, flare gun, first aid supplies, enough food and water for 3 days. Standard protocol for extended backcountry search operations. The Hoh River Trail is one of the most beautiful hikes in the continental United States, if you're into that sort of thing. It winds through what they call temperate rainforest. Basically, think Amazon jungle, but cold and gray instead of hot and green. Massive trees draped in club moss, the ground carpeted in ferns, everything dripping constantly even when it's not actively raining. The canopy is so thick that full daylight looks like dusk, and by 4 in the afternoon you need a flashlight to read your compass. I found Iris's campsite around noon on the first day, about 8 miles up the trail. Her tent was still there, properly set up, research equipment neatly organized. No signs of struggle, no obvious damage from animals. But she was gone, and so was her day pack with all her personal gear. The satellite communicator was still in the tent, which immediately raised red flags. No experienced researcher goes into the backcountry without their emergency beacon. That's when I should have called for backup. That's what the manual says. When you find a scene that doesn't make sense, you establish a perimeter and wait for additional resources. But I was young and stupid, and wanted to be the hero who found the missing person and brought them home safe. So I documented the campsite, took photos, and started following what looked like a trail heading north toward the river. The footprints were clear enough at first. Iris wore size 7 hiking boots with a distinctive waffle tread pattern. The impressions in the soft earth showed she'd been walking, not running, heading generally northwest toward a series of small lakes marked on my topographical map. I followed the trail for about 2 hours, checking in with base every 30 minutes like protocol required. That's when the first strange thing happened. My GPS unit started showing my position as about half a mile south of where I knew I was. I could see distinctive landmarks, a massive fallen cedar, a rock formation that looked like a sleeping bear that I'd marked on my approach. But according to the GPS, I was still back near Iris's campsite. I figured it was just the thick canopy interfering with satellite reception. Happens all the time in old-growth forests. The footprints led to the edge of a small clearing where the trail split 3 ways: north toward the lakes, east toward higher elevation, and west toward the river. But here's where it got weird. There were prints going in all 3 directions. Same boots, same gait pattern, but heading in completely different directions, like she'd been confused or disoriented. I spent maybe 20 minutes trying to figure out which trail was freshest, kneeling in the damp earth, comparing the sharpness of heel impressions and the amount of water that had collected in each print. That's when I heard it, a woman's voice calling for help, faint but clear, coming from the direction of the river. "Help! Please, someone help me!" My training kicked in immediately. I keyed my radio to report contact with the missing person, but all I got was static. Not dead air, not the usual crackling you get in heavy forest. Actual static, like white noise. I tried the satellite phone. Same thing. Even my emergency beacon wasn't showing any bars. The voice came again, weaker this time. "Please, I'm hurt." I didn't have time to troubleshoot communication equipment. Someone needed help, and I was the only one in position to provide it. I marked my position with orange flagging tape and headed toward the river, following what looked like drag marks in the soft earth. The sound of the Ho River gets louder as you approach, a constant rushing whisper that masks other noises. That's probably why I didn't hear the footsteps behind me until it was almost too late. Heavy boots trying to step quietly but not quite managing it on the wet moss and fallen branches. I spun around, hand moving instinctively to my sidearm, but saw nothing except gray tree trunks disappearing into mist. "Hello?" I called out. "Forest Service. If someone's there, identify yourself." Silence. Just the river and the constant drip of condensation falling from the canopy. I should have trusted my instincts right then. Every primitive part of my brain was screaming that something was wrong, that I was being watched, that I needed to get out of there immediately. But I was still thinking like a rookie ranger following protocols instead of like prey being hunted. The drag marks led to the riverbank, where I found Iris Valdemar's day pack half submerged in the shallows. The fabric was torn, contents scattered across the rocky shore. Her research notes were soaked and illegible, her backup radio smashed against the rocks, but no sign of Iris herself. That's when I saw the blood. Not a lot, just a few drops on a flat boulder near the water's edge, fresh enough to still be red instead of brown, but starting to coagulate. I was crouched down examining the stain pattern when I heard the voice again. "Help me. Please." Closer this time, maybe 50 yards downstream. But something was off about it. The tone was wrong, the cadence unnatural, like someone reading lines from a script instead of actually crying for help. I followed the sound, weapon drawn now, every nerve on high alert. The riverbank was treacherous, wet rocks covered in slippery moss, hidden holes where you could easily turn an ankle or worse. The sound of rushing water was loud enough that I couldn't hear anything else, which meant I couldn't hear if someone was following me. 30 yards downstream, I found her. Iris Valdemar was alive, but barely. She was wedged between 2 large boulders in the shallows, water flowing around her legs, unconscious but breathing. Her left arm was bent at an unnatural angle, obviously broken, and there was a gash on her forehead that had bled heavily down her face and neck. But here's the thing that still gives me nightmares. She was positioned too perfectly, like someone had arranged her there, made sure she'd be visible but not easily reached. Her good arm was draped over the rock in a way that looked almost theatrical. I called out to her as I approached. Ma'am, can you hear me? I'm with the Forest Service." She didn't respond, but I could see she was breathing regularly. I managed to reach her without falling into the river myself, checked her pulse, strong and steady, and started assessing her injuries. The head wound looked worse than it was, mostly dried blood. The broken arm would need immediate medical attention, but she wasn't in immediate danger of dying. That's when I tried my radio again, and that's when I realized how much trouble I was really in. Not only was the radio still producing nothing but static, but my GPS was now showing my location as somewhere in Canada. The satellite phone displayed no service, even though I was in an area where I'd used it successfully during training exercises. My emergency beacon wasn't transmitting. The indicator light that should have been blinking green was dark. Every single piece of electronic equipment I was carrying had failed simultaneously. I've been in the Nebraska plains during thunderstorms that produce electromagnetic pulses strong enough to interfere with electronics. I've seen solar flare activity disrupt GPS satellites. But this was different. This felt deliberate. I was still trying to figure out what was happening when I heard Iris mumble something. I leaned closer and she opened her eyes, bright blue, wide with terror. "Don't trust him," she whispered, so quietly I had to read her lips as much as hear the words. "He's been watching. He knows you're here." "Who?" I asked. "Who's been watching?" But she'd lost consciousness again. I managed to get her out of the water and onto solid ground, used my first aid kit to stabilize her arm and clean the head wound. She needed to get to a hospital, but I was at least 6 hours from the nearest road, and that was if I could find my way back to the trail in what was now rapidly approaching darkness. That's when I heard the whistling. It was coming from somewhere across the river, a simple tune I recognized but couldn't place. Something from childhood, maybe a nursery rhyme or a song from school, but it was being whistled slowly, deliberately, like someone was trying to get my attention. The sound stopped abruptly when I looked up. I've lived in forests most of my adult life, and I know the difference between natural sounds and human sounds. This was definitely human. Someone was out there, probably watching me, and they wanted me to know it. "Hello," I shouted across the water. "I've got an injured person here. I need help." No response, just the river and the wind in the trees. I made the decision to try to carry Iris back to her campsite, where I could at least get her into shelter and try to signal for help with my flare gun. She was unconscious but breathing steadily, and I figured I could manage the 8-mile hike if I took frequent breaks. I rigged up a makeshift stretcher using my emergency tarp and some fallen branches, got Iris secured, and started the long trek back through the forest. It was almost full dark by then, maybe 5:30 p.m., and I was navigating by flashlight and memory. That's when I discovered my compass was spinning, not just giving wrong readings. The needle was rotating slowly, continuously, like it couldn't find magnetic north. I tapped it, shook it, even tried recalibrating it according to the manual, but it just kept spinning. No GPS, no radio, no satellite phone, and now, no compass. I was effectively lost in one of the most remote wilderness areas in the continental United States, responsible for an unconscious injured person, with no way to call for help. But I still thought I could handle it. I knew the general direction back to the trail, and I had enough food and water for both of us if we rationed carefully. The plan was to get back to Iris's campsite, tend to her injuries, and then signal for help at first light using emergency flares. I should have realized that someone who could systematically disable modern electronics probably had a plan for dealing with emergency flares, too. The hike back took almost 4 hours. Iris regained consciousness twice, both times just long enough to mumble warnings about someone watching us before fading out again. I tried to get more information, but she was clearly concussed and not making complete sense. We reached her campsite around 9 p.m. Her tent was exactly as I'd left it, research equipment still neatly organized, but something felt different. I couldn't put my finger on what had changed, but the scene felt staged. like someone had been there and carefully put everything back in place, but not quite perfectly. I got Iris inside the tent, checked her vitals again, and gave her some water and pain medication from my first aid kit. She was more alert now, able to answer simple questions, but still obviously confused and frightened. "How long have you been out here?" I asked her. 4 days, she said. "Maybe 5, it's hard to tell." "Your department said you were only planning a 3-day trip." I was, but I found something that shouldn't be here. "What kind of something?" She looked around nervously, like she was afraid someone might be listening. "Bones," she whispered. "Human bones, old ones, but not ancient, maybe 10, 15 years, hidden in a cave about 2 miles north of here." My blood went cold. "Did you report this?" I tried, but my satellite communicator died the first night, and then he showed up. "Who showed up?" "I don't know his real name. He said to call him Walker, tall guy, maybe 45, military tattoos on his arms. He knew I'd found the bones, said I was trespassing on his territory." Iris was getting agitated, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. I gave her more water and tried to keep her calm. "This Walker," I said, "what did he want?" "He said he'd been using this area for a long time, said he didn't like people finding things they weren't supposed to find. He told me he was going to have to do something about it." "Did he hurt you?" "Not directly, but he followed me for 2 days, always just out of sight. Left things where I'd find them, pieces of clothing, personal items that obviously belonged to other people. And he could make sounds, animal sounds, people calling for help, even children crying. I thought I was going crazy. I felt like someone had just walked over my grave. The voice I'd heard calling for help earlier, that had been him, using Iris's voice somehow to lure me deeper into the forest." "Where is he now?" I asked. Iris shook her head. "I don't know. I tried to run yesterday morning, headed for the river. That's the last thing I remember clearly. I think he let you find me. Let me find her, like I was part of some game he was playing." That's when I heard the whistling again, closer this time. The same tune, but now I recognized it. "Ring Around the Rosie," being whistled slowly, almost mournfully, from somewhere just outside the circle of light cast by my flashlight. I grabbed my sidearm and stepped outside the tent. "This is the Forest Service," I shouted into the darkness. "Identify yourself and step into the light." The whistling stopped. For maybe 30 seconds there was complete silence. Then I heard something that made my skin crawl. Applause. Slow, deliberate clapping, like someone appreciating a performance. "Very good, Ranger Torino," a voice called from the darkness. Male, calm, with just a hint of amusement. "You're better than most. Most rangers would have called for backup by now." He knew my name. Somehow, this person knew who I was. "Step into the light," I repeated, weapon raised. "Do it now." "I don't think so," the voice replied. "This is more fun, don't you think? Besides, we both know your little pistol isn't going to help you out here. What do you want?" "Want?" He laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. "I want to see how long you last, Ranger Torino. I want to see what you do when all your fancy training fails you. When your equipment stops working and your protocols don't apply and you realize you're just another piece of meat wandering around in my forest." I could hear him moving, circling the campsite just outside the reach of my flashlight. His footsteps were deliberate, unhurried, the movements of someone completely confident in their environment. "Your forest?" I called out. 23 years I've been coming here," he said. 23 years of watching city people and weekend hikers stumble around like blind children. Most of them never even see me. But some of them find things they shouldn't find. Like Dr. Valdemar found. Like Dr. Valdemar found. And now like you're going to find if you're smart enough. The footsteps stopped directly behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there except darkness and the faint sound of his breathing. "How are you doing this?" I demanded. "The electronics? The equipment failures? You really want to know?" His voice was coming from a different direction now, off to my left. "Military jamming equipment. Portable electromagnetic pulse generator. Amazing what you can buy on the internet these days if you know where to look. You're jamming everything? Everything electronic, yes. GPS, radio, satellite phone, emergency beacon, even that fancy digital compass of yours. But I can't jam instinct, Ranger Torino. I can't jam fear. I tried to track his voice, but he kept moving, staying just outside my light. It was like trying to hunt a ghost. What happened to the others? I asked. The bones, Doctor. Valdemar found. Accidents, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Hiking accidents, falls from cliffs, animal attacks, hypothermia, drowning. You'd be amazed how many ways people can die in the wilderness, Ranger Torino, especially when they're alone and scared and their equipment doesn't work. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't just some deranged survivalist playing games. This was a serial killer who'd been using the Olympic National Park as his personal hunting ground for over 2 decades. The Forest Service will send search teams, I said. When I don't check in tomorrow morning, they'll come looking. Will they? He asked. Are you sure about that? Because according to your radio logs, you've been checking in right on schedule, haven't missed a single report. That was impossible. My radio had been producing nothing but static all day. You see, Ranger Torino, I've been doing this for a very long time. I know how your department operates. I know your protocols, your equipment, your procedures. I even know your supervisor's voice well enough to fake radio transmissions. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If he'd been impersonating me on the radio, headquarters thought I was fine. They wouldn't send anyone looking for days, maybe weeks. Now, Walker continued, here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave Dr. Valdemar here with me, and you're going to start walking east toward the high country. I'll give you a 1-hour head start. Like hell. Oh, but you will, because if you don't, I'm going to hurt her, badly, and I'm going to make you watch. I could hear Iris whimpering inside the tent. She'd obviously heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. And if I do what you want? Then we play the game, Ranger Torino. You run, I hunt. If you make it to the road, and that's a very big if, then you win. Dr. Valdemar lives. You live. Everyone goes home happy. And if I don't make it, then you become another hiking accident, and Dr. Valdemar, well, she already knows too much about my work. She'll have to stay here permanently. I had maybe 5 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether both of us lived or died. Fight him here and now, with no clear target and an injured person to protect, or play his game and hope I could somehow turn the tables. I chose to run. 1 hour, I called into the darkness. 1 hour, he confirmed. And Ranger Torino, no cheating, no doubling back, no trying to set up ambushes. I'll know if you do, and Dr. Valdemar will pay for it. I grabbed my pack, checked my remaining supplies, water for maybe 2 days, food for 1, emergency gear, and the flare gun. No electronics that worked, no way to call for help, and a killer with military training hunting me through terrain he knew better than I knew my own backyard. Before I left, I knelt beside Iris's tent. I'm going to get help, I whispered to her. I'm going to get both of us out of this. She grabbed my wrist with her good hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. He's not human, she whispered. The things he can do, the sounds he makes, it's not possible. He's human, I told her. Just very good at what he does, but he can make mistakes and I'm going to find them. I hoped I sounded more confident than I felt. The hike east from Iris's campsite led through some of the most challenging terrain in Olympic National Park. Dense forest giving way to steep rocky slopes, creek crossings, deadfall that created natural obstacles and perfect places for ambushes. In daylight, with proper equipment, it was a difficult but manageable trek. In the dark, being hunted by someone who knew every inch of the terrain, it was nearly impossible. I made it maybe 2 miles before the real terror began. I was following what I thought was a game trail up a steep ridge when I heard the first child's voice. Mister, help me. High-pitched, terrified, coming from somewhere off to my right. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, crying and calling for help. Every instinct I had screamed at me to respond. You don't ignore a child in distress no matter what. But I forced myself to keep walking because I knew it wasn't real. Walker was playing with my mind, using recordings or voice mimicry to try to lure me off the trail. Please, mister, I'm lost. I can't find my mommy. The voice was getting closer, more desperate. It sounded so real, so genuinely terrified, that I had to bite my tongue to keep from calling out. Then I heard something that almost broke my resolve. The sound of a child sobbing, heartbroken and hopeless, fading away as if she was giving up on being rescued. I kept walking. The voices continued for the next hour. Children crying, women screaming for help, men shouting warnings about bears or cliff falls. All of them designed to make me stop, make me investigate, make me deviate from my path so Walker could close the distance between us. But the worst one was my own voice. I was crossing a small stream using my flashlight to find secure footing on wet rocks when I heard myself calling from somewhere behind me. Base, this is Torino. I found the subject. She's injured but stable, requesting immediate medical evacuation at the following coordinate. It was my voice exactly, giving a routine status report. But I wasn't making the call. I was standing knee-deep in freezing water, listening to someone else speak with my voice, probably transmitting false information to headquarters. That's when I realized how sophisticated Walker's operation really was. He didn't just know the terrain and the protocols. He had professional-grade voice synthesis equipment, jamming technology, maybe even hacking capability to access Ranger communication frequencies. This wasn't some crazy mountain man playing games. This was someone with serious technical resources and military training using Olympic National Park as a testing ground for psychological warfare. I reached the top of the ridge around midnight, maybe 4 miles from Iris's campsite. The forest opened up into a small meadow, and for the first time in hours I could see stars. The temperature had dropped into the 30s and my breath was visible in the thin air. That's when I made my first major mistake. I decided to rest. I found what looked like a defensible position, a cluster of large boulders that would provide cover and limit the directions Walker could approach from. I turned off my flashlight to save batteries and settled in to eat some food and plan my next move. The silence was complete. No wind, no animal sounds, no distant traffic noise. Just the kind of absolute quiet you only get in deep wilderness, miles from any human activity. That's why I heard the footsteps so clearly. Slow, deliberate, circling my position at maybe 50 yards distance. Heavy boots on rocky ground, making no attempt at stealth. Walker wanted me to know he was there. I drew my sidearm and called out into the darkness. I can hear you. Show yourself. The footsteps stopped. Very good, Ranger Torino. His voice came from directly in front of me. Most people would have kept quiet, hoped I'd pass by. But you're thinking tactically. I like that. What do you want? I want to make you an offer, a modification to our agreement. I'm listening. You've done better than most, made it further, avoided more traps, ignored more distractions. You're actually presenting a challenge, which I appreciate. I could see the faint outline of a human figure maybe 30 yards away, standing perfectly still. So, here's my offer, Walker continued. If you can make it to the Ho River Road by sunrise, that's about 6 hours from now, I'll let both you and Dr. Valdemar live. But if I catch you before then, the deal is off. How do I know you'll keep your word? He laughed. You don't, but what choice do you have? The figure disappeared. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, like it had never existed. I waited maybe 10 minutes, listening for any sound of movement, then started working my way down the far side of the ridge. The Ho River Road was probably 8 miles from my current position, over some of the most difficult terrain in the park. In daylight, with proper equipment, it would be a challenging but manageable hike. In the dark, being hunted, with failing equipment and limited supplies, it was borderline impossible. But I didn't have any other choice. The next 4 hours were the longest of my life. I moved as quickly as I dared through dense forest, trying to balance speed against noise, constantly listening for signs that Walker was closing the distance. Every shadow looked like a human figure. Every sound could be footsteps or equipment, or the crack of a branch under a boot. I fell twice, once badly enough to tear my jacket and scrape skin off my palms. I got turned around at least 3 times, wasting precious minutes backtracking when I realized I was heading in the wrong direction. My water ran out around 3 a.m., and I was starting to feel the effects of dehydration and exhaustion. But the worst part was the psychological warfare. Walker kept pace with me, always just out of sight, occasionally calling out commentary on my progress. Nice recovery from that fall, Ranger Torino. Most people would have broken an ankle on those rocks. You're bearing a little too far north. The road is more southeast from your current position. Getting tired yet? You've been moving for almost 8 hours. When was the last time you had a proper meal? He was trying to get inside my head, make me doubt my decisions, wear down my mental resistance, and it was working. I was starting to second-guess every choice, question every route decision, wonder if I was walking into traps he'd set hours earlier. Around 4 a.m., I stumbled into a small clearing and realized I was completely lost. Nothing looked familiar. The terrain didn't match my mental map of the area. I could be anywhere within a 50-square-mile area, and I had no way to determine my position or get back on course. That's when I saw the light. A warm, steady glow coming from somewhere ahead of me, through the trees. It looked like a campfire or maybe a cabin window. Signs of human habitation. People who might have working communication equipment or at least knowledge of local trails. I knew it was probably a trap. I knew Walker was smart enough to use my desperation against me, but I was exhausted, dehydrated, and completely lost, and that light represented the only hope I had of getting out of the forest alive. I approached carefully, weapon drawn, trying to see what I was walking into before committing to it. It was a cabin. Small, maybe 1 room, with warm light spilling from the windows and smoke rising from a chimney. It looked like something from a fairy tale, a cozy refuge in the middle of the wilderness. Too perfect, too convenient. But as I crept closer, I could see details that made my blood run cold. Antlers mounted on the walls, but not deer or elk antlers. Human skulls. Racks of what looked like hunting trophies, but the shapes were wrong for any animal I could identify. The light I'd seen wasn't coming from inside the cabin. It was coming from a large fire pit in front of the building, where something large was roasting on a makeshift spit. I don't want to describe what I saw in detail, because some images don't leave your head once they get in there. But it wasn't an animal. I was backing away from the clearing when I heard Walker's voice behind me. "Welcome to my workshop, Ranger Torino." I spun around, weapon raised, but he was already too close. Something hard hit my wrist and my gun went flying into the darkness. Before I could react, I was on the ground with his boot on my chest and the point of a large knife at my throat. "Game over," he said. Walker looked exactly like Iris had described him. Tall, lean, military-bearing, with the kind of weathered face that comes from spending years outdoors. But his eyes were what I'll never forget. Completely calm, almost bored, like this was just another day at the office for him. "You did better than most," he said conversationally. "Made it almost 6 hours. The record is 8 hours and 23 minutes, set by a Marine sergeant about 5 years ago." "Let me go," I said. "You said if I made it to sunrise, you'd let us both live." I lied. He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "I always lie. That's part of the game." He was reaching for something behind his back, probably restraints or another weapon, when I remembered the flare gun in my jacket pocket. I'd forgotten about it completely during the chase, focused on more conventional weapons and survival gear. But it was still there, a single shot that might give me enough of a distraction to escape. I managed to get my hand on the grip just as Walker was pulling his hand from behind his back. I didn't aim, didn't think, just pulled the trigger at point-blank range. The flare hit him center mass and exploded in a shower of sparks and chemical fire. He screamed, the first sound I'd heard from him that suggested he was human, and stumbled backward, clawing at his burning shirt. I rolled away, grabbed a fallen branch, and hit him as hard as I could across the side of his head. He went down, but he wasn't unconscious. I could see him moving, trying to get back to his feet, so I hit him again. And again. And again. until he stopped moving entirely. I should have checked to make sure he was dead. I should have secured his weapons, searched for keys to any vehicle he might have, looked for evidence of other victims. But I was running on pure adrenaline and terror, and all I could think about was getting as far away from that clearing as possible. I grabbed my gun from where it had fallen, oriented myself using the stars, and started running toward what I hoped was the direction of the road. I have no clear memory of the next 2 hours. Exhaustion, dehydration, and shock had taken their toll, and I was operating on autopilot, just putting one foot in front of the other and hoping I was heading in the right direction. I remember falling several more times. I remember drinking water from a stream and hoping it wouldn't make me sick. I remember thinking I could hear Walker behind me, pursuing me through the forest even though logically I knew he was either dead or seriously injured. The sun was just starting to rise when I stumbled out of the forest onto the Ho River Road. I've never been so happy to see asphalt in my life. I collapsed right there on the yellow center line and just lay there for maybe 10 minutes, breathing and staring at the sky and trying to convince myself that I was really out of the forest. A park maintenance truck found me around 7 a.m. The driver later told me I was incoherent, babbling about electronic warfare and hunting games and bodies in a cabin. They got me to the hospital in Port Angeles, where I spent 3 days being treated for dehydration, exhaustion, and what they diplomatically called acute stress reaction. It took another day to organize a search and rescue operation to find Iris Valdemar. They found her exactly where I'd left her, alive but in bad shape from exposure and untreated injuries. She spent a week in the hospital, but she recovered completely. The search team also found Walker's cabin. What they discovered there confirmed everything I'd told them and worse. Evidence of at least 12 victims over a span of 20 years. All of them missing persons cases that had been written off as